The most incompetent and unqualified Secretary of Defense in history, the only one who had to pledge to stop drinking in order to win Senate confirmation, keeps changing his story. And we don't know if he stopped drinking. When publicly suspected of murder, changing your story is cause for increasing suspicion of guilt. And when your changed story is worse than your first false account, then your story cannot survive a real investigation. And now Pete Hegseth's story hinges on a new lie, the fog of war. He's claiming the fog of war, but you cannot have the fog of war without a war. And Pete Hegseth does not have a war. Pete Hegseth has gone from saying he could see very clearly what was happening when he authorized the killing of 11 people in a small boat running on outboard motors that posed absolutely no threat to the United States of America in any way, a boat that was about 1,200 miles away from the nearest point in the United States of America. He's now claiming that he couldn't see what was going on that boat because of the fog of war. Vietnam combat veterans can tell you about the fog of war. They can tell you about not knowing which direction the gunfire was coming from when it was killing their teammates. Soldiers in real combat situations in any war can tell you about the fog of war. But there is no fog in Pentagon offices where Pete Hegseth was watching that boat. And there is no fog in that video that we have seen of that small boat destroyed by an American missile under Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth's authority and under their orders. Here is Republican Senator Rand Paul's summary of Pete Hegseth's personal fog of war.
There's a very distinct statement was said on Sunday. Secretary Hegseth said he had no knowledge of this and it did not happen. It was fake news. It didn't happen. And then the next day from the podium at the White House, they're saying it did happen. So either he was lying to us on Sunday or he's incompetent and didn't know it had happened.
Senator Paul knows that he doesn't have to choose between lying and incompetent. Pete Hegseth has proved he's capable of both. George Will is the dean of conservative political writers in this country and the best prose stylist of all of them. In his new Washington Post column, George Will says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth seems to be a war criminal without a war. There was a time when George Will was the thought leader of the smartest Republicans in our government, but he has mostly given up hope of influencing Washington Republicans in the Trump era. And now, with the Washington Post reporting that Pete Hegseth authorized a second missile strike aimed at the wreckage of that small boat because there were still 2 people alive clinging to that wreckage. George Will wrote, "The killing of the survivors by this moral slum of an administration should nauseate Americans." The moral slum of the Trump administration. Donald Trump is doing what he always does when he's in trouble. He's pretending he doesn't know anything about it, except that he knows for sure that he was not involved in it. When Donald Trump was not closing his eyes and apparently nodding off in today's absurd reality show that he calls a cabinet meeting, Donald Trump insisted that he's the only president of the United States in history incapable of obtaining information about a military attack under his authority.
As far as the attack is concerned, I still haven't gotten a lot of information because I rely on Pete. But to me, it was an attack. It wasn't 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. Somebody asked me a question about the second strike. I didn't know about the second strike. I didn't know anything about people. I wasn't involved in it. I knew they took out a boat. But I would say this, they had a strike. I hear the gentleman that was in charge of that is extraordinary. He's an extraordinary person. I'll let Pete speak about him. But Pete was satisfied. Pete didn't know about second attack having to do with 2 people.
Oh, so that's their new story today. Pete didn't know about the second attack.